One of the biggest developments in web design over the last few years has been embedded fonts. These are fonts that are non-standard for the web. Pretty much any type of font you want can be embedded into a website without hurting SEO, and that's very, very important. Instead of being physical graphics, you still have your HTML behind the scenes, but through a system of JavaScript, it replaces those tags and the lettering with styled fonts, beautiful fonts. Look at this. Here's All About Us right here, and watch when we switch over to here. Now all of a sudden we've got a totally different font in there. This is all being done through embedded fonts. Now, there are several ways to go with embedded fonts in general and then in WordPress in specifics. Let's take a look at those. The very first type has been around for a little while now, although it's funny to think of, I call them old school now, but they've only been around a few years. Cufon is one of them. These are actual replacement libraries of fonts that you had to physically create, and it was very straightforward to do, and they had an automatic generator online. You can do it, and then you specify for your system to use those files when they replace the HTML, the heading tags and so forth. The trick here is you had to generate your own files. Most importantly, you had to have legal right to do it. And a lot of people were generating fonts that they didn't have the right to generate, and people were running into all sorts of trouble. The ones that were available were pretty limited, so that was the other problem. Enter a new type called hosted fonts. This is where the font is actually being served from somewhere else, and they provide legal fonts for you to use. Typekit is one of these. In fact, one of the investors in Typekit is Matt Mullenweg of WordPress fame, of course. The other one that's competing with Typekit is Google Fonts. The trick with Google Fonts is it's completely free. So that's an interesting option to look at for your clients. And of course, you know, Google's been pretty good about maintaining repositories for things over time. So of course they're likely to be around. Typekit is a paid system. It's free to a certain extent, but it's very, very limited for small personal sites. Now, you can use Typekit or Google Fonts pretty easily without any plugins whatsoever, actually. All you have to do is put a couple of lines of JavaScript at the header of your WordPress site, and then you're manipulating things through either style sheets or, in the case of Typekit, they have a very, very easy to use interface where you can manage many, many websites from one place. They have a beautiful interface for this. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. You don't even need a plugin. However, let's take a look at how these plugins can work on WordPress. To do this font, for example, I was using Google Font. This is WP Google Font, a plugin. Very easy to use. I just plugged it in. In fact, I don't have to have an account with Google at all. Here's my drop-down menu of all the possible Google fonts that I could use. And I tell them generally where I want it to be used. This actually isn't all that helpful in a way, because other than perhaps for body tags and block quotes, but usually headings are specified in your style sheet. So what I've had to do here is I've had to actually specify the exact CSS. Now you're going to have to do this in Typekit, in wherever you are. The one thing I noticed here was that I had to literally specify the full rules for the particular selector. And you can do it for many different font options. You're not limited to just the one. Very, very straightforward to use. Here's the Google font factory, so to speak, the ones to choose from. There's certainly lots there. With Typekit, one of the things is you get a lot more fonts. I mean, at this point, I've got the portfolio one myself, and that's got, over 600 at this point that I recall. Here's the difference. You could get the personal one, which is $24.99 per year. Remember, that's per year. But you can only use certain limited fonts on it. It's for only 2 websites, and limited fonts per site. So again, not a lot there. You can preview it, trial it for a little while too. But this one, especially for you as a designer, this could be absolutely perfect. I mean, even the performance one, depending how many sites you're doing and how big the sites are, how much traffic they have, that's pretty good value for covering all of your websites. $100 per year, not a lot to ask, really. So there's a lot of very good options here, incredible ease with which you can replace these. One thing I will note, by the way, when I make changes in Google Font, in fact, let's go and do it right now. Let's put this in as Anonymous Pro. Actually, I'm going to choose something a little easier for me to type. I'm going to choose Alan, and I just put in Alan here. And I just type that in. Again, this is something I'm not that keen on. You have to completely change it each time, but there we go. So I've saved it. Now watch what happens on here. It's instantaneous. That's something I noticed with Typekit. There's a little more time involved. I've noticed somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes sometimes for the new font to show up. Not a big deal, but it's something to remember and keep in mind. Google, I'm discovering, because I hadn't really tried it before, with the Google fonts, it's pretty instantaneous. But again, not as many fonts available on Google as with Typekit, or some other services out there as well.